Story 1. I once accidentally lost my driver's license down the little gap in the elevator doors. I just dropped it and was super unlucky as it slipped through. It turned up in my mail 10 years later, obviously long expired, but still crazy that some maintenance guy found it and bothered returning it. Story 2. Worked at a hotel. A guest dropped their phone down the elevator shaft. After a few failed retrieval efforts, we called the elevator technicians. They went down, got the phone, and also found a carton of eggs. Rotten but not cracked. I don't even understand how that could happen accidentally. Story 3. My dad was an elevator mechanic for about 15 years. He had a very dark sense of humor and would come home with some of the craziest stories. For example, anytime he was in an elevator, he would shake it a little or tap on the displays or buttons and say, "Yep, total piece of crap. Inferior piece of crap." I think he mostly did it to freak people out. One of my favorites. He got a call that someone was hearing weird noises from the elevator. He got inside, rode the elevator up, and sure enough, he could hear it too. For half a second, he thought it was a baby crying and realized it was a cat. When he got to a certain floor, he could hear the sad meowing. It obviously wasn't in the elevator car. So he got into the shaft and found this little orange kitty. It had somehow, and I don't think he figured out or told us how, got into the elevator shaft and was sitting in a spot between the floors where it wouldn't get crushed by the elevator, but it couldn't get out. My dad saved it and gave it to the building manager to see if it belonged to anyone in the building. It was the one time he ever told us a story that involved him saving an animal instead of finding dead ones. Story 4. My dad has a great story about this. He supervised the mechanics, and one of them called him from a mental hospital and said, "You've got to see this." The maintenance guy was called because the elevator wasn't quite sitting level on the ground floor. It was about half an inch too high, and both patients and staff had been tripping on it. But all other floors were no problem. My dad arrived to find the maintenance guy cackling, looking into the bottom of the shaft. There were probably tens of thousands of magazines down there. They had to get a bunch of shovels, a small crew, and a rolling dumpster to clear it out. When it was all done, my dad decided to stay behind and pretend to read a newspaper while he sat in the lobby. After about half an hour, he sees an elderly patient holding a magazine, shuffling slowly toward the elevator. He stops in front of the doors, glances left, glances right, and quickly stoops down, slides the magazine into the gap, and shuffles away as fast as he can with a huge grin on his face. My dad could not help but laugh hysterically. This guy had probably been sliding magazines in there multiple times per day, every day, for decades. I should ask him whether he reported it or let the guy have his fun. Wouldn't surprise me if my dad went with the latter. Story 5. Our team dropped a steel anal dilator down the dumbwaiter shaft by mistake. When the technician came down and grabbed it off the floor, I'll never forget the look on his face when I told him, "We need that up here. It's got to go in someone's ass soon." It was priceless. I am a technician for a hospital. Dealing with rectal surgical tools is very normal. Story 6. One time we were doing a rip-out at an old factory. They were gutting them and turning them into luxury apartments. The elevator we were taking out was a shabby old freight that hadn't run in years. When we finally ran it up, we went down to inspect the pit. It smelled like a dead body had chilled there for half a century. The bottom floor wasn't lit, so I shone my flashlight under the elevator, and the whole floor started moving. Roaches. Nasty. Haven't really found anything fun, though. I've cleaned out more pits than I could count, too. I gave my mom a cheap ring I found. Found a pair of underwear at a hotel. Found a full packet at a courthouse of some lady's case transcribed. Oh, I was on a modernization once, and one of the hoistway doors had an advertisement sticker for a tennis restringing service, which was weird because it was somewhere only an elevator guy should be able to reach. I called the number, but it was out of service. I found some cool graffiti from the 40s. That's about it. I worked on escalators for a year and a half. There was a lot more in those pits. I was taking home bent-up quarters every day. There were lots of shoe bits, and I was always nervous about coming across used needles in certain units. Story 7. I am not a technician, but I do work at a large hotel. A few years ago, one of our elevators stopped working. It turned out that when they opened it up, they found a 3-foot pile of guest folios that were never delivered to the rooms. Later, when we looked at the camera, we found it was a security guard who got tired of delivering them to the rooms and instead dropped them down the elevator shaft. He did this for months until he was caught. Story 8. This question should be my jam, but unfortunately, I have never found anything interesting. A $2 coin once, a dime bag of some unknown drug, plenty of syringes or sets of keys. It is mostly just people's junk mail and empty chip bags down there. Story 9. Obligatory note. I wasn't an elevator technician, but hotel maintenance. A guest reported hearing waterfall sounds in the elevator shaft on the way to the lobby. An investigation followed. The sump pump at the bottom of the shaft was running constantly. Water was still coming out of the drain it was connected to after I unplugged it. I found out from the notes of the third shift maintenance that multiple first-floor rooms had repeatedly clogged toilets throughout the night. A plumber was called. The 6-inch sewer drain for the entire building was clogged. Worst clog I've seen in 15 years. There were washcloths and toilet paper causing over 7 inches of clog in the pipe. Apparently, it was clogged so badly that it was backing up into the laundry room, the drain for the elevator shaft, and the rooms closest to the main pipe out of the building, first-floor suites. Solid waste was left at the bottom of that shaft. I quit about a week later for unrelated circumstances. Story 10 keys. Trash. Bugs if the building is exceptionally poor. Mostly dirt and dust. Found a paint roller that the last person left there once. It was stuck to the floor. Not a whole lot of strange items can make it between the windowsill and the landing. Story 11. Surprisingly, nothing too extreme. I'm not an elevator technician, but I am an electrician, so we find ourselves in a pit from time to time. Some identification badges, credit cards, and coins. Once I found a red pen. It was out of ink, though. Story 12. Work security in a large department store. We routinely had to open it to retrieve dropped keys, wallets, and phones. Recovered a $2,500 gold necklace covered in feces. A potential shoplifter darted out of our jewelry department and concealed the necklace while in the elevator. When he realized we were waiting for him at the exit level, he went back up a floor, removed it, and dropped it down the shaft. We arrested him anyway, much to his surprise. Story 13. Work for a major transit hub. We have our own trade departments. I am in elevator maintenance. Weirdest things I have found are as follows. Chucky doll head. 13 rubber duckies in one pit. Drug needles almost daily. Silicone gimp mask. Every day is an adventure. Story 14. At a place where my wife used to work, there was a crash from the elevator area. The boss went to see what it was, came back white as a sheet and said, "Do not go out there." 2 maintenance guys had been working on the elevator. One was at the bottom of the shaft, and the other made one small error. But I'm guessing the single most unusual item ever found at the bottom of an elevator shaft was a Wright R-2600 aircraft engine on July 28, 1945, in the Empire State Building. Story 15. I used to work in an old 22-story building that had the first automated elevator system in our state. The idea was that to control the flow of people in the lobby, you'd push the button for your floor, and the elevator would tell you which one to get on. The elevators would ensure the crowds spread out over the big lobby. Anyway, it was the first time I'd ever seen the automatic door sensors used, too. I worked on the executive floor, where long-winded executives would often stop me as I was leaving. I got used to passing my hand through the doors to break the sensor and hold the doors open. You guessed it. My left hand didn't trip the sensor. The doors closed on my hand, which was prevented from closing completely because of my heavy engagement and wedding rings. The whole mess was crushed, and I lost a 2-carat diamond 22 stories below. My hand was only bruised. Thank goodness for the safety shutoff. I like to think that someday, someone will find a tiny treasure. Story 16. Not an elevator technician, but I can tell you someone, at some point, is going to find a Kindle at the bottom of a shaft in a Toronto hotel elevator. Rules to remember. Rule 1. Always check that you zipped your carry-on and didn't leave a gap at the bottom. Rule 2. Kindles fit through small carry-on bag zipper gaps and elevator shaft gaps. Story 17. Not an elevator repair person, but you would be shocked by the number of nurses that drop their keys down the shaft. 20 stories up and 2 buildings away from the parking garage, and they already had their keys in their hand. I had to call maintenance all the time for retrieval. Story 18. I worked as a phlebotomist in a hospital and had just drawn blood from an elderly male patient. As I pushed my cart into the elevator to go back down to the laboratory, his blood vials rolled off and went down the gap into the shaft. I felt so bad and went immediately back to tell him I had to draw his blood again. He was thrilled. He said he was excited that his blood would be down the shaft for eternity. Such a funny guy. Story 19. Retired 40 years in the trade. The best I ever found was a $20 bill. But I know a man who found a $7,000 diamond ring. He kept it for 6 months and no one ever asked about it, so he gave it to his wife. Story 20. Not elevator maintenance, but one time I dropped a set of wheels for a cart in the crack. I'm sure some maintenance man is going to be concerned to find loose wheels in the elevator of a nursing home, like some elderly person is walking around with a wheel-less walker. Story 21. There are at least 6 people who saw a purple object and everyone left it there. Either all have seen the same purple object, or purple objects are more common at the bottom of the elevator shaft. Everyone is absolutely sure they are telling the truth. Story 22. Not exactly an answer to the question, but still related. When we came to call about broken doors, we were not expecting that someone, for some unknown reason, stole one half of the elevator door. Story 23. In 1988, the same bones were rediscovered when a new elevator shaft near the south parking lot on Elm Street was excavated. At that time, 11 skulls and 88 pounds of bones were found in one day, followed by 119 more pounds of bones. The Inquirer reported that they were being stored at the morgue. Cincinnati Music Hall, built on a children's home, built on a potter's field, built on a burial site, built on bulldozed indigenous mounds. Story 24. Holy moly, I asked a guy this at work last night. It wasn't as surprising as I expected. Just a ball. A very large ball that had no business being able to get down there. Then I asked if he ever left anything strange down there for the next guy. He went quiet and slowly turned to me, pulling a Barbie out of his pocket. Story 25. A few months ago, we had a floridly psychotic patient, think staring into space, unable to form a coherent sentence, etc., brought into the hospital. There was a fire alarm at an apartment building, and when firefighters went in, they somehow found this guy living in an elevator shaft. He had evidently been there for some period of time. Most of the delusions he was talking about, those that I could understand, were about time travel and Jesus. So, we joked a bit that he wasn't actually psychotic and was just time-traveling Jesus. Story 26. It depends on the building and neighborhood. I've seen everything from dirty diapers to used needles, keys, wallets, phones, picture frames, sandwiches, and I guess the icing on the cake was a Tamagotchi. No, it didn't work. So we typically just trashed everything unless it was valuable. I always turned jewelry into the management office, but I worked with guys who definitely sold valuables for unsavory purposes. That crack between the car and the door sill is a black hole for objects. Story 27. The company where I worked had an old heavy-duty freight elevator that was semi-abandoned. It was more like an automotive lift with giant pistons embedded in the ground, but installed in an elevator shaft. When they needed to move something huge, they would fill the hydraulics with oil. It took hundreds of gallons to top off the system, including the giant pistons, and then they would use it for a day. A few months later, they would try to use it again and find the oil gone. Once, they planned to use it the following day, so maintenance pumped in the oil to get ready. The next day, no oil. They refilled it the morning of the move and got one lift out of it before it stopped. The company knew it was spilling hydraulic oil into the ground under the plant and just did not care. They finally abandoned it for good when the maintenance guys threatened to report the illegal oil dumping. Story 28. I had to clean some bad insulation at the top of the elevator chamber. So the maintenance guy brought the elevator with the top at the second floor and we went on top to drive to the top. On the elevator cabin were a few pairs of women's underwear and used condoms. So someone was having sex on the top of the elevator. How they got there was a mystery because it was a very modern one and you need a special key to open the control box to access the top of the elevator. Story 29. In college, I pulled out my lanyard on which my Motorola RZR was sitting. My phone flew up in the air and dropped in the gap between the elevator and the floor. It dropped 4 floors. Maintenance was able to climb down there. My phone barely had a scratch. Story 30. My dad has been an elevator repairman for almost 30 years now. His best find to date was a $12,000 yellow diamond engagement ring. He tried for a while to find the owner, but eventually he got to keep it. Story 31. I've been in the game for 12 years now. Found a full Christmas tree last month. Other finds: 5,000 pounds in 20-pound notes. A large bag of drugs, roughly 5 kilograms. Brand new shoes by the box load. A severed finger. Edit. This has really gotten a lot of attention. My most commented and upvoted post on Reddit. So here's the backstory. The Christmas tree was found this year on a council estate in August. Photos were taken for the office as it was rather amusing. I visit this lift every month. The money and drugs were found in the same lift shift around 3 months apart 7 years ago. The money was split between me and my engineer as I was an apprentice at the time. We handed the drugs into security. The shoes were found on a passenger/staff lift out the back of JD Sports. It's suspected that a staff member was storing them there and loading them into a car at the end of his shift. The police were involved in this one. The finger was found in a very expensive apartment building with 50 floors and million-pound-plus apartments. Again, the police and emergency services were involved in this one.